Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, November 13th, 2014. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, the first of a two-parter, Mad Fermentationist Mike Tonsmeire joins Andy, Steve, and me to taste homebrew Berliner Weisse. We taste plain, along with versions brewed with rhubarb and lemon. If you're new to homebrewing, would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. We have a Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing video page on Facebook as well, facebook.com/basicbrewing. We're on Google+. Thanks again, everybody, clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. You know how it works. Whenever you feel an itch to shop on Amazon, go to our website first, basicbrewing.com. Click on our Amazon ad. It will take you back to Amazon. You won't notice any difference, but we will, because you'll be helping us to bring you this show. We greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes, our Android app on Amazon.com. We have a Windows Phone app. We're on the BlackBerry Podcast Directory, and we're on the Stitcher app as well. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. And thanks to everybody who has done so already. We have a new item in the Basic Brewing shop to coincide with the holiday gift-giving season. It's the Jumbo Combo. It's not it's not only fun to say, it's a great deal. All 4 of our DVDs, plus our bottle opener, plus our brewer's logbook. So 4 DVDs, a bottle opener, and the logbook for one low price. A lot of good stuff for the special price of just $49.95. If you were to buy all those items separately, you'd pay more than twice as much. So if you've already got all these items, the Jumbo Combo would make a great gift idea for the newbie homebrewer or for a friend or relative that you think would enjoy getting into the hobby for the first time. And, of course, it's for a limited time, so go to basicbrewingshop.com and check it out. Let's take a very quick look into the mailbag. Andy writes from Parts Unknown and says, has anyone ever steeped a small amount of crystal malt in their apple juice, then made a cider with it to give it that caramel/brown sugar note? Well, I haven't done it, but that sounds like a fun idea. I would think that you'd want to pasteurize the cider after steeping the grains in it, because there's probably some lactobacillus on the grain or some other critters that may sour or funk up your cider. So a little bit of heat, let's say bringing it up to, say, 160 Fahrenheit or 71 degrees Celsius to sanitize the must. I guess cider is must. That should do the trick. So let me know if you've done it, if you've steeped grains in a cider, and let me know how it turned out. One more note before getting to Mike and the good stuff. This past week, our friend Brian Sorensen wrote a very flattering and very well-written story about us, the Basic Brewing crew, on the Fayetteville Flyer website. It's really a comprehensive background on how this whole Basic Brewing thing came together, and how Steve and Andy and I met in the beginning. We sat down with Brian for over an hour over beers at West Mountain, and what I thought was a hopelessly rambling conversation. So at the end of it, I was like, how is he going to make something out of that? But I was very impressed with how Brian brought that all together into a fun and interesting piece, so check that out at FayettevilleFlyer.com. I also posted a link to that on our Facebook page. So now, Michael Tonsmeire has been coming to the show for coming on this show for almost as long as we've been doing it. His Mad Fermentationist blog, and now his very successful book, American Sour Beers, Innovative Techniques for Mixed Fermentations, are very inspirational to experimental brewers. Steve and Andy and I were very excited to share some of Mike's beers and talk about how he put them together. We even shared one of mine. So this week, we start with Berliner Weisse. Well, Mike Tonsmeire, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Always a pleasure to be on here, James.
Steve Wilkes in the studio.
I am in the studio, and I'd rather be here than anywhere else.
We won't tell your wife.
That's right.
And Andy Sparks.
I'm thrilled to be here. Yeah, this is going to be fun.
And we have a selection of beers And our plan is to divide this up into 2 shows. If you're listening to this show first, we probably sound more sober than in the second show.
What's the ABV average of these? I need to know if I need a cot for later.
Well, the height of bed, or there is a height of bed in the other room, so
Okay.
Everything is cool.
And we're drinking Berliners, so I mean that's 3% alcohol. You'll be fine.
The
All right.
ultimate session beer, right?
Yeah, and I can't. Mine is fairly low too. I shouldn't get my recipe to go follow along, but it's a small batch. And why don't we go ahead and start with, or actually, how's the book going?
It's going really well. I for a while there, I was just happy to be done with it. But now I'm having a blast promoting it. I was at the Great American Beer Fest. I was just down at the Dixie Cup in Houston. I've been talking to some guys in Brazil. I might go down to Brazil for the Brazilian Homebrewers Conference. I'm talking with the Master Brewers Association of America in Virginia in a couple of days. So it's been a real change from hanging out in my room, typing on my blog, actually having to go out and meet people and talk about sour beer rather than write about sour beer.
Well, congratulations. I'm glad it's going well. But we're going to start with this is a rare occurrence here. I don't know if we tasted one of my beers in one of these exchanges before. I can't remember.
You've certainly sent me beer before, but I can't remember if we actually had the tasting on the air. Not in the recent memory, anyway.
So this is a sour wurting beer, and we have done sour mashing before on the program, and I've done that twice and mashed in the kettle. And the problem with that is that I could not keep an adequate CO2 blanket over the mash, so that over a couple of days, you get some kind of garbagey smelling smells coming from it. So
definitely, I'm never a big fan of sour mashes. Some breweries and some home brewers do them really well, and you only get a little hint of something, but often somebody says sour mash, and you're in for something real weird.
Well, what I did on this one is I did a regular mash, brought it down to 120 degrees Fahrenheit by adding cooler water, and then I inoculated it with unmilled grain in that mash, and held it there for half an hour or so, just to make sure that it got good and inoculated. And then it was brewed in a bag, so I collected the wort, and then poured. It was a 2-gallon batch, so I filled 2 1-gallon jugs up to the top with the wort, and put that into my electric smoker and set the temperature for 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 44 C, something around there. Thinking that that's as low as it was going to get. But when the heater kicked on, it would go up to say 120. So I held that at that point for 3 days, and then I boiled for 15 minutes, putting some, I think, Czech Saaz in the hops or in the boil, and then fermented with USO5, and this is the result.
It's nice. It's really clean, bright, lactic, crisp. I mean, almost sort of a citrusy, sweet tarts kind of bright, quick acidity. It doesn't really linger.
I get a little kind of apple cider kind of thing going on.
It's not as tart as I might want. Next time I do it, I might hold it in there for like 4 days. Do you think that would increase the tartness, Mike?
It certainly could. When you use grain, there's always a little bit of variability to it, just because you're relying on whatever happens to be living on the grain. But I've had good luck with the microbes on grain, particularly compared to some of the commercial lactocultures, which don't make a lot of acidity, honestly. And I've actually had better luck with some probiotics. That they seem to be really aggressive, hardy lactose strains in there.
Like probiotics that you'd buy at the health food store or something?
Exactly.
Wow.
Particularly the refrigerated ones. I haven't ventured into the sort of freeze-dried capsules, but the ones that sometimes you'll see over in a case in the health remedies section or whatever of your local co-op or your local natural food store.
Nice.
So do we approve?
Nice. This is delicious.
Yeah, I really like it a lot.
Yeah.
And
It's certainly not. I mean, the first version that I did was there was a little bit of garbaginess in it. The next version was not as it was a lot cleaner. This is certainly clean as a whistle. I don't get any, the kind of dumpstery things.
Right. It's just sour, not funky.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's
the nose has a little, maybe it's almost like cedary or something like that. It's nice. I mean, it's definitely not off, but it's maybe it's just the size. Maybe it's a little herbal or something like that.
Yeah, it was. The hops were only boiled for 15 minutes, so there may be some hop aroma in there as opposed to a standard bittering hop, but it's nice and clear, and refreshing.
Yeah, this would be a great summer beer, and with a shot of fruit syrup, be delicious.
Yeah, well, that's
like a traditional Berliner.
Yeah, spoiler alert, Steve and I are working at probably the next episode of the video podcast is going to be this beer. And we'll show you how I brewed it. And then Steve's working on a blueberry syrup.
Yeah, blueberry syrup.
So, anyway, to pair with that. So,
good luck. I did blueberry syrup for a Berliner I brewed years ago and really liked it.
Well, cool. Yeah,
great combination.
That's a good palate cleanser,
That's
and
really
a good
nice.
And a good way to start off the evening. But yours, I think, are probably going to be more interesting, Mike.
Yeah, Berliner Weisse is one of those styles that I feel like I've sort of figured out how I like to brew them, and so I just sort of keep brewing a batch or two a year. And so recently, I've started, rather than just having just plain Berliner Weisse, which I love, doing weird ingredient additions to them. So we've got a couple of different ones to try today. I think we're going to be starting off with the rhubarb Berliner Weisse.
Awesome. Yeah.
So shall we rinse?
Yeah, but I'm not going to spit.
I have no reason to suspect that carbonation is an issue on this one, but it's a 2.5-year-old Berliner Weisse. Don't open it over anything valuable.
Okay. Well, we've got a sink here in the studio, so
Okay.
that's a good thing.
Here we go. Oh, no. Perfect.
No surprises. Oh,
Oh, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, it does.
it's kind of pink.
It has a pinkish hue.
Didn't you go to school with him?
I did. There's a little bit more in here.
Ooh.
Thank you.
That's worth having. You can have the cookie.
Ooh, that's definitely funkier than mine.
Oh, man.
Yeah, delicious. And I've only smelled it so far.
Yeah, so this one, all my Berliners have Brett in them. Sometimes people just think that they're like sort of mini lambics or something like that, particularly with some age on. This one wasn't quite as sour as I wanted it, so I had some rhubarb that I had picked up in season, washed, chopped up, and then thrown into a vacuum bag and thrown in the freezer. I was originally going to add to a dark saison that, by the time I was ready to add it, was already more than sour enough. So that dark saison got quince paste, membrillo, to sort of complement those flavors. And I said, hey, I've got this Berliner that's not sour enough. Took half of it, tossed it onto rhubarb. So I think it was about 2.5 pounds and 2.5 gallons. And so, yeah, it had this sort of beautiful pink color. And
Boy, really, the rhubarb just jumps right out. I mean, I'm stunned how rhubarby it is. I mean, it's like a lot of times fruit gets lost. Mm-hmm. The essence of the fruit kind of gets lost. You say, oh yeah, that's a fruit beer, but you don't know what's going on. But this is rhubarb, man. And it reminds me of when I was a kid because we grew rhubarb, and I hated it because we'd hate this damned rhubarb every night. Jeez. So, but this is much better.
Well, your palate has matured a bit.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the rhubarb.
other than strawberry rhubarb pie,
That's
which
the
is,
only way
I
I've
think,
ever
how most
tried it,
people.
right?
See, I'd pair this with a strawberry
who knows really
pie.
what it adds.
Yeah, I'd pair this with a strawberry pie.
Well, I was going to point out that the color is beautiful, and whereas the strawberry beers that I've seen people make, and I've tried to make, completely wash out. They end up having almost no color. This stuff really carries the color right on through.
So I did a pomegranate beer for the previous show that we a video show that we aired, and I put the pomegranate juice at the end of the boil, and by the end of the fermentation, all the pink was gone. So I'm wondering if I'd put the pomegranate juice in the secondary fermenter instead, whether we'd maintain more of the pinkish hue.
It may be. I know this. I don't know what the coloring compound in pomegranates is, but anthocyanins, which are like what make great eggplants purple, are pH sensitive. And so, like, I've done some eggplant curries that you cook it down with some tomatoes, and the eggplant almost turns green. The color sort of goes away.
Yeah.
And so it may be that the pomegranate, that's what's happening. That may or may not. Maybe having the lower pH of a sour beer would change that, or maybe that'd make the problem even worse. And same thing with post-fermentation. I don't know if that would, if it's the fermentation causing the issue, or if it's just a pH issue, which will be there, after fermentation too.
So talk about your base beer. Talk about the base Berliner Weisse.
So basically, my sort of standard Berliner is I do more Pilsner malt than wheat usually. I tend to do like 2/3 Pilsner, 1/3 wheat malt. It's the way a lot of Berliner Weisses used to be done way, way, way back in the day. Now most Berliners use a little bit more, like 50% wheat. I don't think it really matters either way. I don't think wheat actually adds much flavor to a beer. Wheat's relatively bland. But so I take that. In most cases, what I'll do is I'll do a protein rest. I'll throw some hops in with a decoction mash that brings it up to the saccharification rest. And then I run off. I don't even boil it. I just bring it up to about 210 degrees to pasteurize it, chill it down, and then I'll pitch lactobacillus, US-05, and whatever bread I happen to have on hand. The sort of twist on this one is I didn't do the decoction. This one is, I believe this one was, I'll double check, but I believe this one was just a single infusion mash. Checking my website, let's see. I've done so many of these that it's hard to keep track of the Berliner Weisses. Yep, this was just a single infusion mash, 147 Fahrenheit, and I pitched. This one was the White Lab 677, their sort of standard Lactobacillus delbrueckii, which I find to be sort of underwhelming in terms of acid production. I actually took half this batch and pitched nothing but Lactobacillus, and it ended up very much like a tart wheat beer, like an American wheat beer, like maybe a Bell's Oberon or something like that. And this one also, this part of it had White Lab's Brett Trois, which I'm a big fan of. It's the sort of one of the fruitier Brett strains.
Yeah, the Brett really adds a layer of complexity to it. It's not just a tartness,
right,
but the funkiness on top of that really. It makes it a broader beer, so to speak. There's a lot more going on.
But it also, to me, can take away from the refreshing. If you really just want something that you can drink ice cold when it's 95 degrees out, this may not be the Berliner Weisse for you. This is a Berliner Weisse that is nice to drink a little bit warmer, that you might want to savor a little bit more. Different beers for different times.
Yeah, I agree with that. The rhubarb has a little astringency that makes it not quite as refreshing. It's delicious.
Yeah.
I might want to have it with food or, as kind of like an aperitif or something like that rather than a session beer.
Yeah. And this one, the rhubarb was inspired. Cantillon every year does a Zwanza beer, their sort of special annual release that used to be bottled, and these days you have to go, to a specific bar. There's only, I think, 10 or 15 of them in America.
Wow.
And a few years, one of the original ones they did was a rhubarb lambic. And I missed that one, but they redid it, I forget, 2 or 3 years ago. It wasn't this one or the one before that. It was the one before that, I believe, 3 ago. And they recreated that, and I was really blown away by it. Just such a different idea, rather than... They're just so, I love cherry and raspberry, but I think they are they often sort of overwhelm the base beer, whereas rhubarb adds its own character but still lets the Brett through. It still lets that base beer.
Yeah,
it's a more subtle balance.
Absolutely.
And I don't know that you would want to add any kind of syrup to this beer.
No, I don't think it needs it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you would spoil the subtle character of the beer. I think that you would lose something rather than gaining something by putting any kind of syrup in there with it. Whereas mine is kind of it's not bland, but it's a kind of a blank palate with a bit of sourness on there, where a little bit of fruit in there would probably be pretty tasty, which may be the way the traditional Berliner Weisses were meant to be originally.
There's definitely, and I think it's hard to lump all Berliner Weisses into one thing. I was lucky enough to have a bottle of Schultheiss Berliner Weiss, which was one of the last ones from that sort of the original Berliner Weisses that survived from the 19th century that still had bread in it. And they were bought out by Kindle Weiss, and they were sort of done away with. And someone, I took a BJCP class 6 or 7 years ago, and somebody had a bottle of Schultheiss that had been in their fridge for 7 or 8 years at that point, and they opened it up. That was one of those life-changing beers. It was funky and really sour and really interesting, but clearly had lost favor because that's sort of classic story that you go to Berlin now, and my wife happened to have it happen to her. She wanted Berliner Weiss without syrup, and they said absolutely not. And whether that was because it was all pre-mixed anyway, and they weren't adding the syrup, it was just pre-kegged with the syrup, or that they just didn't understand and thought she didn't understand. But that certainly is what Berliner Weiss has become. But there are some great, if you ever find it, Bahnhof does a special edition of their Berliner Weiss called Brett Lambicus that is every bit as good as that Schultheiss was. I mean, funky and sour and really interesting. It's hard to find. I haven't seen it in a couple years. I'd buy a lot of it next time I saw it.
What do you think the dregs of an Orval would do in adding the Brett character to this beer?
I think it would be great. Actually, the lemon Berliner Weiss that we'll be opening in a little bit had the dregs from a bottle of Saison Brett that you very graciously sent me about 6 months ago. I love Brett. I don't think I've ever actually used Orval dregs in a Berliner Weiss, but I think it would be spot on. Cool. It would be a little bit funkier than this one is. Brett Trois tends to be a little bit more in the fruity pineapple direction. Brux, though, I've done some on the funkier end and scored well in competitions and had people really enjoy them. Tends to be a little bit more lambic-like, a little bit more of that rustic farmyard hay and horse blanket and whatever you want to call it.
Well, shall we rinse?
Yes.
Cool. And again, these are good session beers to start the session off with.
Really
good. Thank you, sir. I might have to do more of those. Because that sour wording is going to be more predictable and dependable than the sour mashing.
It's quicker too, and then just not having to deal with it and babysit that that sour mash.
Yeah. Shall we? Do we need to open this over the sink, or should it be okay?
No, this one is a lot younger. This one is was just brewed about 5 months ago, and so it should be safe if it's cold and has been shook up too much or anything like that.
Lovely. Ooh, it's very lemony looking.
It's green.
Yeah.
And not that the head retention is terrific on this one, but I did a little tweak that I think gives it some head retention where the Berliner sort of really evaporated. This one, at least for me, is pouring with a quarter inch or something like that.
It's certainly working on this end.
Yeah, I poured aggressively.
Yeah, so I did with this one, and
wow,
actually would be a great tip for sour wording too, is to add a little bit of lactic acid before you add the lactobacillus. If you get the pH down to about 4.5, 4.4, you inhibit the lactobacillus from breaking down the proteins that contribute to head retention. And so, the Burghard Meyer, professor in Berlin at the VLB, did a presentation at the Craft Brewers Conference a couple years ago in Berliner. That was one of his tips, and then he said that also to use really high-protein chit malt or something like that if you can get it. If you're using wheat, you don't mind throwing some really high-protein unmalted wheat in there. That would probably work too, or spelt, anything like that.
I think I put some rye in mine, just a little bit. But this is it's greenish. Oh my!
It's very lemony.
Yeah, no kidding.
So could you use a little acidulated malt in your mash? And
Definitely. Although it takes a surprising amount of acidulated malt. I did a beer that was 20% acid malt, and that ended up at about 4.5 pH.
Right, and then using a lot of acidulated malt, is not a great flavor component, I guess, right?
Well,
I mean, if
you're doing lactobacillus and you're doing bread anyway, I think it will get sort of covered up and integrated into the flavor profile. And this had lactic acid from a jar, not a lot. Because pH is logarithmic, going from 5.5 to 4.5 is only about 10% of what 4.5 to 3.5 is. So this is like 10% of the acidity in this is the lactic acid, and 90% is from the lactobacillus. This is, to me, this is more acidic, younger than the rhubarb was. This was the new Weisse Lactobacillus brevis strain. White Labs has one too. They tend to be more aggressively acidic. And this one, as I was saying, same US05, and then this one did have a decoction mash. It was the sort of the second runnings from a sour, tart, funky saison with a bunch of New Zealand ingredients in it.
I really get a lemon fresh horse blanket. it's like somebody dusted with lemon pledge on my mayor. It's really good, but the nose is really funky to me.
I think maybe to me the lemon is kind of covering up the funkiness a bit in the nose. Maybe you may be more sensitive than I, but the previous one, I think the rhubarb one, smelled more funky.
Huh?
What do you think, Andy? Be the arbitrator.
I think this is nicely balanced. The lemoniness is not overpowering. It really complements, to me anyway, the sourness. It's very subtle. I'm not one to like a lemonade. It's just too much for me. This is just delicate and delicious.
Yeah, it's like grown-up lemonade.
It's like a lemon. It's like a lemon drop. Where lemon drops aren't, they've got some sweetness to them, so it's not all about tartness. But there's that lemony, or lemon. Think of lemon meringue pie.
That's exactly what I thought the first time I sipped it.
Well, I think the acidity on this is more in line of a beer I could really drink a lot of. Right? It's not quite as tart as the one before it. This one I
think a lot of that is just the age. This one was brewed this summer. The other one was brewed 2 summers before that. So there's a big age difference in these.
And they do steadily get more sour over time, right?
Exactly. As that, hopefully that lactobacillus, if it's still working, if there's still carbohydrates there, it'll keep making lactic acid. On this one, the lemon flavor is from the zest of 3 lemons. I've actually, for a long time, I did like a microplane, like that real fine, zester, really. And when I was out at Marin Times a couple of summers ago, Alex Tweet, one of the brewers, he used to be the cask guy at Ballast Point. He was the one who originally came up with the grapefruit sculpin, which is awesome. And he does potato peeler. And I found, I don't know if it's that you're getting a little bit deeper maybe, and so you're getting more of the oils out of it. But I found you just get so much more character using a potato peeler, trying to leave as much of the pith as you can behind, but you're going to get a little of the white, but getting all of the yellow, all of the whatever color your citrus fruit is. And this was only 24 hours in secondary right before bottling. So real quick.
Huh. Yeah. Maybe that's why the oils are so. Maybe the oils are still in there. And so it didn't have a chance to kind of oxidize out or air out.
And my thought would be that if you were zesting lemon peels or orange, any zest like that, those oils would cause head retention problems, right? But this beer is obviously not having that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just at a low enough level that it certainly doesn't help head retention, but it's not going to completely sink it.
Wow, it's delicious.
Well, I could pound those all night long. That's a good beer.
I'm going to leave that straight line. That's really good.
That's really good.
And the it is like a lemon meringue pie. It's just it's got the mouthfeel is substantial, and it's got this creamy head on top. And man, that is nice. And what's the ABV on this?
about 3.2, something like that, I think.
Wow.
It finished at 1.002, so I mean that body you're getting is proteins, it's certainly not carbohydrates.
That really beats that 3.2 beer I used to drink in Kansas.
Yeah, you could buy this cold in Oklahoma.
But it's weird. I never had a lemon Berliner Weisse before, but it seemed like this. People always talk about Berliner Weisse, and when you introduce it to someone who hasn't had it before, you say, "Oh, it's like lemonade. It's acidic, but it's not it's not like vinegar. It's not over the top sour." That why have I never had lemon in a Berliner Weisse? It sounds like a great idea, and so I gave it a shot.
Yeah.
Very tasty.
Yeah.
Well, shall we rinse? Shall we?
Absolutely.
You're doubtful of the double lemon Berliner.
Yeah, we'll give it a shot. It's
okay.
I'm worried with Steve and Andy saying that this one was lemony enough. They don't want more lemon. This one is lemonade in a glass.
Well, if it's
right down to being uncarbonated. If the last time I opened one is any indication.
If it's a double lemon, we'll call it an AMC Pacer.
Or a gremlin.
Or a gremlin, that's right.
I'm getting it's certainly not well carbonated, but I'm getting some carbonation at least. Woo!
It's not like I'm opposed to lemon flavor, but
This will be the test.
Yeah, very very light. Is it petulant? Petulant?
Petulant?
I'm pouring aggressively. And there are some bubbles, but I think water might get the same result.
I got a little hiss when I opened it. So this is the exact same beer, right down to the lemon zest that the previous bottle was. But in addition to that, I got a bottle of Just Lemon, which is freeze-dried lemon juice, lemon oils, and a little maltodextrin to hold it together.
Right.
The manufacturer claims no preservatives. My working theory is that I know vitamin C can be a preservative, and so maybe just the vitamin C from the lemons was enough to maybe not kill the yeast entirely, but really slow them down.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
well, I know a lot of times on like frozen juice concentrates, like apple juice, it'll say apple juice and ascorbic acid, vitamin C, right? So that's enough to keep it acidic enough to let anything grow, I guess, right?
Yeah, but I mean, and lactobacillus, I don't think this tastes much more acidic. I can't imagine it's just the acidity that's stopping the lactobacillus from growing, but it is slowly carbonating. So the reason I use this, I can't name names, but I've heard a couple of very well thought of breweries have used similar products, probably sort of more commercial grade of it, but to get citrus flavor into their beers. And I'm impressed. The flavor is, to me at least, relatively fresh, lemon juicy. It doesn't have an artificial note to it. It doesn't have it's certainly a lot easier if you wanted to do a big batch than trying to juice 500 lemons or 1,000 lemons or something like that. Particularly if you want to keep it sanitary, if you don't want to introduce any, if you're hand juicing lemons or something, it's hard not to get a little grate of yourself in there at some point.
So how much of this juice to 5 gallons?
So this was a 5-gallon batch. Half of it was the 2.5 gallons was what we had before. 2.5 gallons was this. I'll look up exactly. I think it was about 2 ounces. In addition to the zest that the other one had. Anytime I use a new product like this, I always do some tests. So I did it by weight. It's 25 grams. So it'd be about an ounce by weight of true lemon in about 2 gallons.
Wow, that's not very much.
No,
that's a lot of lemon flavor for it.
But it's good. I think other than the, if I suppose you could force carbonate this.
The other issue, actually, this just came to me. I do remember when I added, because I added the powder straight without dissolving it. I got a lot of nucleation. I got some foaming. So part of it may just be that I knocked my residual carbonation down below what it was for the other one that didn't have 10,000 little crystals tossed into it. So I guess my suggestion on this one would be If you're adding any sort of powder directly to the beer, just mix it in with the priming sugar or something like that. In my case, I add enough priming sugar for the whole batch and just dosed in the lemon powder. Literally, I bottled half the batch, turned off the spigot, tossed the lemon powder in, and then continued bottling after sort of stirring it in. So I would say if you're adding any sort of powder like this, make sure you are dissolving it first or taking some sort of accounting of the fact that you're going to have a lot lower residual carbonation dissolved in the beer than if you weren't doing that.
It's tasty, though.
Yeah, I like the flavor a lot, and if it ever carbonates up, it'll be really good.
Right.
But the flavor's terrific.
How old is this?
So this was brewed about 5 months ago. This was brewed, I think, in June. Oh, it was actually brewed end of July and bottled end of September. Right. So it's been in the bottle a little more than a month as of the taping of this.
And you
I went back and forth. They do a lime version and a grapefruit version too, but I decided since I had the lemon zest in there, just do straight lemon. The other ones are fun to play with. If you if you've got a kegerator, you just want to pour a bottle and dose in a little, into grapefruit in an IPA or lemon in a lambic or whatever. And I'm a big fan of blending in the glass. People go through so much effort to do these crazy things when you can just make a syrup, or you can blend in juice, or you can add sugar and not have to worry about pasteurization or stabilization or sterile filtering. And it's so easy to customize. If you have someone over and wants to have a Berliner Weisse and they want it sticky sweet, give it to them sticky sweet with 2 shots of syrup, rather than having to deal with what it would be like. I don't want that much of it. Okay, I'll do 4 different versions of it. One for this person, one for me, one for competitions, one for. And that's I always have fun. Whatever I have on tap, inevitably gets blended together to see how it would be. I've got a blonde ale with a little bit of coffee in it that I've been doing anytime I have a bottle of the lemon Berliner Weisse, a little splash of that with the coffee, sort of espresso with a twist. Just brightens it up a little bit. The lemon, the coffee, the coffee blonde has a little Cascade hop in it, so it's already got a little citrus to it. It's just sort of fun combinations that you would never brew a lemon coffee hoppy blonde. Unless you had tried blending them together before and went, hey, maybe this is a good combination. Maybe I will take, a gallon of sour wort, pasteurize it so I don't make it too sour, and blend it in the next time I do something like that, just to make it a little brighter and crisper and more acidic, but not sour.
So what other wacky Berliner Weisses have you done?
One of the early batches, I did one with, I think it was Cabernet juice in it. That one was pretty good. I've actually recently become a much bigger fan of just adding wine directly to the beer rather than getting sort of second-rate inferior. I think that Cabernet juice came. They probably didn't even make it anymore. They were selling various varietal wine juices at my local Safeway, I think, but big box supermarket. Certainly not the finest wine grapes, I imagine. And so recently I've just been doing like the first runnings from this lemon Berliner Weisse were a Saison that I have sort of a house culture that's Lactobacillus and Brett and a couple Saison strains. And I hopped it up with New Zealand hops, so I did Nelson Sauvin, which is that sort of classic, people say gooseberry, it's a very sort of loved it or hated hop, and Motueka, which is lime zest, very sort of citrusy. And then I, at going into the keg, along with 4.5 gallons of beer, I tipped in a whole bottle of super grapefruity Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. And it's this weird terroir thing where when you have the hops from New Zealand and the wines from New Zealand, both are sort of known for these big, bold, citrusy, fruity flavors. And so I just went, hey, how's this going to be? And in reality, it's just a big Imperial Berliner Weisse. I tried to do an Imperial Berliner Weisse before. It did not work well. This worked a lot better, changing that impression, not just making a 6% alcohol beer without much character to it. I think one of the reasons Berliner Weisse works so well is it's light and crisp. If you double the malt, if you double the alcohol, it just sort of ends up being this bland thing with lactic acid. It's not a lambic. You sort of want it to be a lambic. It's not. It's the mouthfeel's gone. It's too thick. It's too full. But making the first rings, this saison, drying it out, giving it some Brett funk, giving it the fruitiness, really worked well. I think actually, most of my Berliners, I've done some dry hopping with Berliners. That's always fun. You guys on your own time have a dry hop lambic to taste. I think anything bright and light and refreshing with a Berliner works well. A good friend of mine did like a low gravity sour beer with pink peppercorns and citrus zest. Anything like that, I think, is a beautiful combination. Berliner Weisses don't work. Berliner Weiss is not the time to break out the raisins or the dates or the prunes or the figs. Those all work beautifully in a big brown sour beer or something. An Ode Brune, a Flemish red. A friend and I every fall do a dark saison that we've used a lot of dried fruits, and the great combinations. Berliner Weiss, I would say, tropical fruits, citrus, American hops, American dry hopping, and anything in that sort of flavor realm, I think is a great combination.
Now, talking about you were blending with wine in the keg, right? You couldn't, if you were to try to do a bottle-conditioned beer by blending a beer with a wine at bottling time, would you have to worry about the sulfites or the preservatives in the wine knocking out the yeast and not allowing it to bottle condition?
I don't think so. I did a beer. It was very early in my brewing career that I added some wine, just regular commercial wine to. I'm adding so little that it's not a problem. In this case, it was about 5% of the blend. And when you dilute the sulfides down that far, I haven't had an issue.
Huh.
You might, if it was a sweeter wine, you might have to worry about the sugar that's in there causing problems. But honestly, particularly if you've got some, and if you were worried about, pitch some wine yeast. Wine yeast tend to be more resistant to sulfides. So rehydrate a gram or two of, whatever bottling, conditioning wine yeast you want and toss that in. Honestly, a lot of my sour beers, if it's not Berliner Weiss that I'm aging for just 2 or 3 months, I'll toss some wine yeast in there. Almost always you're going to be fine. They've found Brett in 30-year-old bottles of Berliner Weiss, but I think you're better safe than sorry rather than those, that 1 in 10 time, that 1 in 20 time that you have to uncap 50 bottles and sprinkle in a little champagne yeast into each one and then pray. I think you're better, packs of wine yeast are like 80 cents each at the homebrew store. Open one up, rehydrate it, mix it in, and you're fine. But yeah, watch out. I mean, honestly, at 5% of the blend, even a sweet wine shouldn't make too much of trouble for excess carbonation, but something to be aware of. Sort of the rule of thumb is if you add 0.001 to the final gravity, that'll add about half a volume of CO2 after fermentation. So that's sort of, it's not exactly, it's real close though. And so I use the same rule of thumb if I'm blending 2 beers. If you're blending a young beer and old beer, if the blend is however much higher than the lower of the 2, then that's about how much you're going to get. So it's not what, if you're adding just a little bit of young sweet beer, you're fine. But if you're blending 50-50, 1.000 and 10-20 beer, and so you're getting a blend at 10-10, you're in big trouble. That's going to be 5 volumes of CO2 plus the residual plus any priming sugar. You're going to have glass shrapnel on your hands.
Maybe literally. Yeah. Unfortunately. Well, this has been fun, and this is only the first half of this evening. Listeners will have to wait until the next week to listen to the second half. But Mike, thanks for joining us again, and we look forward to 2 minutes when we get to try your other beers.
Look forward to talking to you then.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks again to Mike, Steve, and Andy. Be sure to check out Mike's book, American Sour Beers, or go to Mad Fermentationist, his blog, to check that out. Great stuff, as always. Next week, we move into homebrew lambics that Mike has brewed both with commercial dregs and with critters that he has captured in the wild in Washington, D.C. One of those he dry hopped in the bottle. pretty incredible. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All-Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. And for a limited time this holiday season, check out our Jumbo Combo with all of our DVDs, our bottle opener, and our Brewer's Logbook at one special low holiday price. And you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store, too. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that purchased through the link are Recaro Performance Booster High Back Booster Car Seat Sapphire and WD MyCloud Mirror 8 Terabyte 2-bay personal cloud storage. All your files saved twice, accessible anywhere. 8 terabytes. Man. I think our first hard drive on the first computer I had was like 30 megabytes. I'm old. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association or subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dutson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.